Goeiedei, wolkom. My name is Amareska and today I'll be doing my wrap-up of the Contemporary-a-thon. It was the read-a-thon that took place last week and I read 3 books. Let me first give you a synopsis and my short opinions on the books, and then we'll see with which challenges they can fit. The first book I read and finished was the Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This is so adorable and also very sad. We follow the perspective of a cat who recounts his story from the moment he is found in the streets as a stray until he finishes his travels with his owner. And we see a complete decline in health of the owner. I'm not going to tell what actually happens because of spoilers, but we start off with the stray cat laying on the silver fan of our human main character. And the human main character, recognizing the way the cat looks as one of the cats, or the cat he has had in his youth, but he has had to leave behind when he was really young because his parents died, or I believe they died in an accident or so. Then that cat has died in a traffic accident. The cat, by the way, does not look like the cat on the cover. It's a white cat with colorful dots, which I thought sounds very cute. His name is Nana, and the book starts up complaining with the fact that at first he didn't have a name, and when he got a name it sounds very feminine, whilst he is a male cat, which I thought was adorable and funny. And then we start to get into the stories with darker themes, like parents leaving their children behind, neglecting their children, and a lot more hurtful stuff. It's a very sad book, which is something I had not expected. I had expected something light and cute. It was a very well written book, but yet I feel like there got something lost in translation, which usually does happen when books are translated from one language into another. In this case, Japanese to British English. And I say British English because I saw people write reviews about complaining or noting that there were words used in the translation that Americans don't usually use in their speech. But from the moment I started reading this and listening to the audiobook, I was wondering if the translator was maybe a Brit. And it turns out he probably was, because it totally felt like a British person did it. And I also believe that the translation was first published in Europe and not in America, but I'm not sure of that. Anyway, I like the book. I think it has some important messages. It was very fun to read from a cat's perspective. And it was just very interesting to see how all those people dealt with parents that did not care for them the way they should have or could have. If your parents are dead, obviously they are not able to care for you. It was interesting to see what the male main character had all done throughout his life, because we got flashbacks from the perspectives of his friends, which was very interesting too. And then, oh man, the ending. It was sad yet hopeful too, in some kind of way. And I'm very glad I read this book. Then I read Hersenschimmen from Bernlef. This book has been translated into English. It's called Out of Mind. It follows the story of a man who starts getting Alzheimer's disease. In the start of the book, you notice that he has forgotten some things, and he does realize he has forgotten the things. And you see his decline In this case, it's a very fastly progressing form of Alzheimer's disease. I think it's partly written that way for the sake of the story, because otherwise the book would not be under 200 pages, but maybe 400 pages long when it wasn't necessary. But mostly the beginning was extremely sad, because Maarten, our main character, he does realize that he forgets things, and he does realize that what he remembers is not maybe always really what has happened, or not the full story. Sometimes it's completely something completely else is what has actually happened too. And he starts talking about his children when his children come home, or that he has to go to a meeting from his work even though he has been retired for years and years and years. The fun is, this might be an originally Dutch book, but it's actually set, I believe, close to Boston in the USA. But I don't think that really changes your experience of the book, because even though the setting does play a role, it mostly takes place in the winter in the snow. So it's not really of big importance. Where it is set, it's kind of a rural town or village type place. And this hit me because obviously Alzheimer's disease already is kind of a dark and hard-hitting topic to begin with. And this book is written in a way that it hits you. But I've also seen it happening to my grandmother. She got Alzheimer's disease too, and her decline was pretty similar, only a lot shorter, but you saw the cyclical thought too, and the way she asked for what you wanted to drink and then walked to the fridge or the cabinet where the drinks were stored in, and then she would end up there and not know at all what she would be doing. And that was pretty close to the beginning, not that late after her diagnosis. And obviously it only gets worse because there is no cure. There is no medicine again for this still. And the beginning is actually more sad than the ending, because in the ending our character does not actually really note that he forgets things and that he misremembers, if he even remembers some stuff. His language becomes way more jolted and fragmented. Sentences become shorter. You still can understand his thoughts, but they are just way less complex. But in the beginning, he does realize that he misremembers or doesn't remember at all. We see the same book appear multiple times, and the first time he sees that book, he thinks, what is this book doing here? And why is there a bookmark, but like a piece of paper about halfway through? Maybe it's from my wife. Maybe she read until that part in the book. I don't know. And then if you progress, as soon as you progress in the book, you actually discover that he read that, but he just does not remember. And it's just so sad, because that is in the time he actually still knows that he misremembers or doesn't remember at all. And in the beginning I thought, oh no, why did this have to happen? I also listened to a big part of this book, the audiobook of this book, which was narrated by the author himself, while reading parts of it at the same time. If you can read Dutch, or if you can find the translation, I definitely recommend this, because this seems like a book that does not get lost a lot in translation, because the language does not have a lot of stylistic figures that cannot be translated properly. But I could have it wrong, because obviously I did not read a translation, and sometimes I think it'll work, but if you then see what kind of strange sentences the translation brings, it did not work. Anyway, I highly recommend this book, even though I knew what to expect, because I went through something similar with my grandmother. Obviously she went through this similar thing as the main character in this book. But I watched it from the outside. I can say that it is pretty damn realistic. And I would not wish it on anyone. Now we go to my final book, which is What to Say Next by Julie Buxbaum. In this book we follow two teens, two 16-year-olds, Kit or Catherine and David. We follow both of their perspectives. In the beginning of the book, Kit's father died in a car accident, and you get to see her and her mother grieve because her father died and it seems such an unfair thing. And then she goes to sit on David's table. He always sits alone. Everybody thinks he's weird, and it turns out he has Asperger's syndrome, which is something that's actually no longer in the DSM or the book that is used to diagnose people. It's now just autism spectrum disorder, which is noted in this book, which I could completely stand behind, because I think it should be noted that actually that's an old-fashioned diagnosis, but it kind of fits David. He has an IQ of 168, so I have a few critical points about how he acts. Like, obviously autism means that you don't have the innate insight in social stuff that neurotypical people do. And I speak from experience. I recognized a lot of his behaviors, but I also thought that with his IQ and his talent for science and his interest in science, his skills of deduction and mathematics, he should have been able to deduce some of the things of how they work, because you get to see some things over and over and over again. But maybe that is just my perspective, and that is just how it worked out for me and not for David. Also, I felt like the way the traits were portrayed wasn't very nuanced, because usually if you have autism traits, they are not present all in the same, how do you say it, to the same extent. Some are more present and some are less present. That's what you get when traits exist on a spectrum. They are just present enough to be extremely nagging when you want to do stuff. But everything seemed to be present to him to almost the same extent, or everything except one trait I could think of this quickly, which is magical thinking. He does not experience magical thinking very much, but that is one of the traits that comes with autism. It's one of the traits that lets autistic people wonder about the world for so much longer than a lot of neurotypical people do. Which is a shame, because it would totally fit with his love and affection in air quotes, for science. He tries to explain everything with physics and mathematics. He has a very almost innate skill, but also a lot of learned skills in the physics and physics department, from like a basic velocity calculations to the more particle physics components. And it's very interesting to see. At a certain point, not that far from the beginning, Kit asks David to help her find out if something could have gone differently in the car accident, and that her father might have been alive still. And from then on, that question plays a little bit of a background role in the book. And near the end we get some revelations about how it actually happened, what happened the night of that car accident, and what kind of secrets have all been kept locked behind closed door doors, especially by Kit's mother. Man, she was good at forcing to keep secrets. You still don't get a lot of the secrets, but there is a lot of tension in that household, which is kind of interesting to see. But overall, even though it was a fun book to read, I think the autism perspective was a little bit too unnuanced. And also, I think it was a little bit too long. I don't know how it could have been made shorter, but it felt a little bit too long at points. Like it had trouble getting to the point. It partly fits with a perspective of an autistic person who cannot always filter what is important and what the point is and all the details. But the author should have, like, it's a book, but it mostly just felt like the story was drawn out a little bit too long. But on the other hand, it fit with the story, so I'm a little bit in that about this. Anyway, let's get to the point of linking these books to challenges. I have a list of challenges here. Originally I put like 7 or 8 books on this list, but I knew from the beginning that I would probably not be able to read that many books because I don't read that fast. We have my most recently acquired contemporary book, which would be The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. Then a book with blurple on the cover, so blue or purple or bluish purple, which would also be The Traveling Cat Chronicles. Then we have a diverse contemporary. I originally wanted to use What to Say Next because David has autism, but that is a little bit of stretching it because I have autism and ADHD too. I could still use this one, or I could use Hersenschimmen by Bernlef, because obviously an Alzheimer's perspective is a diverse perspective and one you don't come across that many times in your life in any way, shape or form. Then we have a dark or taboo subject. I could count The Traveling Cat Chronicles or Hersenschimmen by Bernlef again. Meant to read in 2018, definitely Hersenschimmen by Bernlef. I have actually been meaning to read this thing for at least 6 years and I finally have. I'm so glad I did. I now know why my Dutch teacher used to recommend this book several times in a row. And I get it. And then we have a non-traditional format, which I could use these 2 books for, because I did not only read this in physical format, I also listened to it as audiobooks. So, and then we have the book with a picture on the spine. Well, What to Say Next could count. It has 2 glasses with drinks on the spine. And The Traveling Cat Chronicles does have a little cat on the spine. So I